Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. I am 2 for 2. I will be 3 for 3 in terms of Supreme Court decisions. Have I not been telling you endlessly for the past month and a half, 2 months, that Trump will get constitutional presidential immunity? He got immunity for official acts as president, partial immunity if you want to call it that. The indictments have to be rewritten. It was unconstitutional. The special counsel's indictment of Trump was not constitutional. I have been telling you this, ladies and gentlemen. Today I've been vindicated, and that's why you hit subscribe to this channel. I told you there would be a 9-0 unanimous decision. A 9-0 unanimous decision overturning the Supreme Court, the Colorado Supreme Court ban. I stated that, and there was a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision. Today, the United States Supreme Court stated that Jack Smith's special counsel indictment and prosecution of Trump, and you have Los Angeles Times, Trump is shielded from prosecution for official acts. Washington Post, Supreme Court rules presidents have immunity for official acts, delaying Trump trial, delaying it forever. It will never happen. Okay, and then you have NPR, AP News. This is absolutely amazing, ladies and gentlemen. What took place is the following. I told you he would be protected by the Constitution for a speech. He is protected. He can speak to his administration officials. He can speak to political allies. These are all official acts. You cannot question the motive of a president when he's engaged in official acts as president. It was an official act to question and to contest results. If he was given information and evidence that he felt was worthy, it doesn't matter if Democrats and media feel that it was an affront to democracy. You cannot level the 18 U.S. Code 371 statute at any president. Okay, you could, if you wanted to talk about motive, you could look at Bush with failed intel reports. You could look at President Obama in investigating Trump with information that completely misinformed the entire country. The investigations into Trump as an alleged operative of the Kremlin started under President Obama. That wasn't a peaceful transfer of the presidency. We found out from the Mueller probe, Trump was not. There was no shred of evidence that Trump was working for another country. Yet we were lied to. And we were lied to by intelligence officials, by Democratic politicians, by media, and it was President Obama who started, his intelligence agencies started the investigations. So does that mean that he defrauded the country? You could look at motive, and do you think maybe it helped his political party? You could look at motive and intent and slice and dice and eviscerate every presidential move, okay? It did not help the country to utilize a Steele dossier purchased by Clinton and the DNC, both of whom received fines by the FEC. Okay, Trump did not receive a fine by the FEC. The FEC dropped the hush money case, and he was still convicted, and I'll be 3 for 3 there. He will have his conviction overturned at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight. We'll talk about that. But hit subscribe. This is a huge victory for the country, for the rule of law. It was unconstitutional. This is the second major unconstitutional, action Democrats have taken, and they're the ones who pontificate about democracy. Let's listen to this today. This is huge.
Sure. Sorry to cut you off. We're going back to Lydia. We have a ruling on immunity. Lydia, what do you got?
Yeah, Ash, this is the big one we've had all eyes on right now. We're getting this just in. Former President Donald Trump from the Supreme Court of the United States does have immunity, and it appears that the decision is limited to his official acts. Remember, a big question after the low.
And I have been telling you, it will go back to the lower courts. Trump will win in November, and he will dissolve the special counsel. Okay? and this was completely unconstitutional. You cannot level a very broad, vague, ambiguous legal statute and say that Trump committed a crime. He categorically did not commit a crime, nor did he obstruct a congressional proceeding. This is absurd nonsense. This is different from a burglary. Watergate was a burglary. That's a very easy, specific, easy to understand criminal act. Okay? Defrauding the country and lying to the country, Biden has done, President Obama has done, with a terribly failed intervention that destroyed Libya. We can go on forever. Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld starting endless military conflict based on failed intel reports. We can go on forever. Okay? Bill Clinton with his activities in the Oval Office. We can go on forever. He actually committed perjury there. But let's continue.
Lower courts in the District of Columbia decided that the former president had no immunity across the board. Would the Supreme Court come back and say, wait a second, we can so-called split the baby? He has immunity for some acts, not others. Official acts, perhaps, not immunity for unofficial acts. Again, Ash, we're just getting this opinion in from the Supreme Court of the United States, but it does appear at this moment that former President Donald Trump, they have decided he would have immunity for official acts that he carried out. So now what would happen is that the case would be remanded back down to the lower courts. The lower court trial judges would read this opinion and they would have to decide what happened around the events of January 6th that would qualify as an official act such that President Trump would have immunity from the prosecution brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Ash.
So, an official act is a speech, for example. It is not breaking into the Watergate building. It is not eliminating your political opponent, okay? Democrats were completely apoplectic as always, and they said, well, if we don't allow the special counsel to indict Trump for a speech, then he can take out his political rivals. He's a monarch. He's a king. No, you highly educated, wonderful, morally superior, possible imbecile. The statutes leveled at Trump were broad, vague, ambiguous, and relied on intent, motive. They stated essentially that his speech was obstruction of Congress, which it wasn't. And he told people to go peacefully. He did not try to foment a rebellion. These are the absurd leaps of logic used. If he actually committed a crime, it wouldn't have taken 3 years and a January committee with 2 never Trump Republicans, which is also which wasn't legal. You needed to have somebody loyal to Trump the way these never Trumpers and all the Democrats were loyal to the Democratic Party to at least defend him in that committee. But we saw from the Carlson footage, people were acquitted, and he can perform a speech. I told you that. A speech that they find objectionable, that they find a criminal act, is not an example of Watergate. It is not an example of an actual criminal act. Okay, so when CNN pundits and others are saying this is very concerning pertaining to democracy, now he can do anything. It's like, no. You tried to imprison him based on your hyperventilating and absurd leaps of logic pertaining to that terrible, fateful day. And by the way, ignoring billions in property damage all throughout that summer. I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated, but the point is they made statements that were not true about Trump, then tried to imprison him and said, oh, he obviously committed a crime. It's like, no, he didn't. He didn't commit a crime. He was entitled to perform a speech, and he's entitled to speak with political allies, and he's entitled to speak with his Department of Justice. And that doesn't mean he pressured people. He tried to deceive people. Again, the entire Mueller probe was an act of grandiose deception. Does that mean President Obama and every other Democrat can be found guilty under 18 U.S. Code 371? No, it doesn't.
On to the timing of all of this. President Trump has given a statement to Fox News Digital in the wake of this decision. I'll read it for you here, and Jonathan Turley, get your take on it, the other side. Former President Trump said, "I have been harassed by the Democrat Party, Joe Biden, Obama, and their thugs, fascists, and communists for years, and now the courts have spoken. This is a big win for our Constitution and for democracy. Now, I am free to campaign like anyone else. We are leading in every poll by a lot, and we will make America great again." So that's his take. Although I mentioned earlier, there's another date on the calendar. This is his July 11th sentencing in New York.
And if he gets jail, which he probably will, the Supreme Court will step in and they will overturn the unconstitutional guilty verdict. And it could be 6-3 also. Could be 5-4, could be 6-3. It really doesn't matter. It probably is going to be 7-2. Okay, Judge Jackson ruled in favor of January defendants. So he's going to go 3 for 3. I'll go 3 for 3 and hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you. What have I been telling you, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, I have to tout my achievements here. I mean, this is what I do, and you subscribe to this channel for a reason. I'm giving pretty good political analysis. I'm not Nostradamus, but I've been pretty spot on, and today vindicates not only, myself, this YouTube channel, my thoughts, writing, opinion, all that stuff. It vindicates Trump. You cannot indict a president for performing a speech that you don't like. This is the second major constitutional victory for Trump. People, this is the man upholding democracy, not the Democrats. This is the man who wins major Supreme Court decisions.
And I agree, Jonathan, with him when he says, "I'm free to campaign like anyone else." Will that be true at the end of the day on July 11th as well?
Well, I would hope that the judge in New York would not impose a jail sentence, because I don't think it's warranted under New York.
I love Jonathan Turley. He knows infinitely more about the law and in politics than I do. I'll just say that the judge will impose jail. Democrats are politically on the ropes. This has been an unmitigated political disaster for them the past week, with a debate that basically it was Trump versus Weekend at Bernie's. And, we all know now the lights are on, but nobody's home with our current president. He's one fry short of a Happy Meal. We can go on forever. And we all saw this, and Democrats lied through their teeth. Oh, it's a speech impediment. Oh, well, then why do you want to replace him now? I guess it wasn't the impediment. But anyway, they lie all the time about Trump, about everything that when media speaks with one voice and it benefits Democrats, they're lying through their teeth. Anyway, the point is, we saw what happened in the debate. Now he gets the Supreme Court victory. Then he's going to get the guilty verdict overturned. But they want to jail him. That is the only thing they can hold on to, the public relations photo of him in jail. The Supreme Court must get involved, and we'll talk about that tonight.
Law, but this case is not over. Jack Smith is not going to go quietly into that night. I want to know two other aspects of this opinion to complete this circle. The court deals with the so-called fake electors issue, and it says, look, that question in dealing with state officials is not something that we see as falling in within these core areas. And so the district court's going to have to look at those communications to determine to what extent.
Those were representatives that were appointed for the short term during court cases where there's actually legal precedent in U.S. history. Okay, I believe in Hawaii. I believe it was JFK during that Kennedy-Nixon, I believe it was that time where there's precedent. So again, Democrats took every single thing they could. They never gave him the benefit of the doubt, and that's why they keep losing these huge, monumental, historic Supreme Court victories.
there is this immunity, presumptive or not, that might apply. But then it also talks about President Trump's January 6th speech and all of his tweets. And the language there seems quite favorable towards President Trump and says that presidents are expected to speak forcibly on issues. That are important to citizens. And it really puts a emphasis on the fact that this is something that presidents do. Many of us believe, certainly I do, that President Trump's speech was entirely protected under the First Amendment. But the court is also saying this is a function of what presidents do on matters that divide the public. So on that, you have another section that's going to help out the Trump team dramatically in front of the district court. The one area that might be a sticky point is going to be the electors issue. Yeah. And even Trump's counsel in front of the court acknowledged that was going to be a tougher one. But otherwise, this is a very good day for the former president. This opinion is quite favorable on most points.
I'm Steve Doocy.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what I've been telling you every single time, I mean, I alternate between the immunity and overturning of the guilty verdict, and I'll be 100% right about that. But when I told you every live stream, hey, he just, essentially got immunity, it's happening, I knew 100%, I was 100% certain. So, and I've been now vindicated. It happened. This day, when people say, oh, it hasn't happened yet, I'm telling you, I told you it was happening, and today we saw it. And so you cannot change and alter how we govern as a country, how the Constitution operates and works just to get Trump. Can't do that, okay? For example, the whole point is they tried to say he deceived the country. Again, you could accuse President Obama of deceiving the country or his intel officials or Democrats, politicians, because they investigated an innocent man there was not a shred of evidence that he was an incoming president with ties to the Kremlin. You could accuse anyone, any incoming president, of being a possible ally or working for another country based on intel reports. You can write an intel report on anyone in any country, a president or a person that has no money and living on the streets. You could say, well, that person, based on intel reports, was an operative, and so you can just do that with anyone. That is not evidence, and Democrats viewed that to be evidence. They viewed gossip and hearsay, innuendo, conjecture, hyperbole to be evidence. Now it's like a dysfunctional high school class. Well, he said this, and we heard that he said this. And they're going to gossip and hearsay as fact. And then they say, with this court case, oh, he's a king now. No. You could, if he actually commits a crime, like any president, if they actually commit a specific crime, they'll be convicted. Trump didn't commit a specific crime, so there you go. But let's go ahead and continue. Huge day for Trump. To my super chat, thank you. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel and be here tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern.
I want to bring in Alina Habba. She, of course, is an advisor to the president's campaign. She's a lawyer who has been in court with him in many different scenarios. And your initial reaction to this ruling, as we have just been handed it, and we're kicking the tires here. I want to get your thoughts, Alina.
Yes, obviously I haven't read the decision as it just came out, and I've read little parts of it. Here's what I think. I think that the justice has made the right decision. Nixon v. Fitzgerald outlined this. Absolute immunity is important for all presidents. I've said it time and time again. I've argued on immunity for President Trump, and I think they did get right that they recognize absolute immunity exists. Another thing that I do think needs to be pointed out is that they said presumptive immunity exists for acts within the outer perimeter of his official acts. So what's going to happen now is that they basically have said, sorry, Jack Smith, you don't get to just impede and intrude on the executive branch. We get to have protections for presidents who are doing things while they are in office so that they don't come out and get targeted and criminally and civilly sued.
presumptive immunity for even acts that might not be official, which is fantastic news. Because what Democrats will do is they'll say, well, he did this that was beyond the scope of an official act when he was still president. They would never do that with President Obama, who has a list of things that he did. From a failed intervention that toppled and destroyed a country, turned it into a failed state, to Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, to Bill Clinton. Okay? You can look at the past 20 plus years and look at other presidents and say they deceived the country. And when they deceived the country, you had complete unmitigated catastrophes in terms of foreign policy. The way Democrats look at things, they say, well, Trump contested results. There was criminal activity that had nothing to do with that, but we're going to link that to Trump. And therefore, he tried to devour democracy. Okay, and this is worse than Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, President Obama, Biden. And you can look what Biden, the southern geographic region of our country, what Biden has done or not done or allowed to take place is beyond a national security concern. It's a human rights, it's a crime against humanity in many ways for what people are experiencing in that region. And of course, Democrats don't see it as a crime at all.
It's incredibly important. It was a good decision. Obviously, I believe absolute immunity should exist for the executive branch, but they did recognize it. And the presumptive immunity now will then get outlined, kicked back down to the courts, and they will look at it. But the presumption that any president, and President Trump was acting within the perimeter, the outer perimeter of his official acts, is clear through this decision from what I've read so far. Obviously, I'll examine it and speak about it further on the network, but I think that this was a very good decision for us.
Alina, it's Brett Baer. The AP writes it this way. They say Supreme Court sends Trump's immunity case back to a lower court in Washington, dimming prospect of a pre-election trial. I mean, is that what you all are hoping for?
He will dissolve the special counsel when he becomes president. The special counsel is part of the executive branch, actually. Okay? So it's actually Biden's executive branch trying to weaken the executive branch, okay? Because they know that, the person when you pull the curtain running the show ain't mashed potato brains, okay? So they don't care. What do they care? And they'll rewrite the Constitution to get Trump. It's funny because Democrats say that Trump is this menace to democracy. They've literally tried to rewrite the Constitution just to get Trump and have been struck down by the Supreme Court every single time. And still they don't accept that what they've been doing was wrong. Still they say, oh, we're right. The Supreme Court is wrong. And that's also a hilarious consequence of all of this.
And that would be the end result, is that anything gets past the election on any of these cases that are pending.
Brett, let me first start by saying that the team here, the legal team for President Trump, and I think the American people think that these cases should never have existed. Let's just be clear. But now we are in this political attack on a leading candidate because they can't win with their candidate. So we are where we are. Now, as an attorney, as a legal spokesperson, I would just say this. Of course, it is a good day when the Supreme Court recognizes constitutional rights of presidents and the executive branch, but we should never have been in this situation to start with. This is a disgrace to America. So yes, the lower courts again will have to hear it. It will, in my opinion, slow down Jack Smith's persecution and selective prosecution of President Trump. And I don't see how this case could go forward before the election. But again, I would say that there's still issues to be discussed, such as how Jack Smith even got into this position, how we allowed our democracy, how we allowed the republic to become one that targets political opponents. The fact that we've been in front of the Supreme Court so many times is frankly a sad day for the American people. It's election interference at its finest. But I'm happy today. I think that Chief Justice Roberts made a good decision for what I'm seeing of. Obviously, I need to read it fully, but recognizing Nixon v. Fitzgerald, upholding that decision and stating that absolute immunity does exist for presidents is a good thing. It's an important thing for all Americans, both Democrat and Republican.
This also completely does away with the memory. This erases the memory of the January committee. No longer will that hang over Trump as, this. It was never a cloud over Trump, but the January committee with Democrats and Kinzinger and Cheney, the Supreme Court ruled he was immune from prosecution. He did nothing wrong. And again, had he committed a specific crime, he would have been convicted and prosecuted. The Supreme Court would not have ruled in his favor. What they said was he deceived, defrauded. And he had the intent and motivation to deceive and to lie. Well, you could look at every president and say that's, that fits that fits this president's decision making. He was protected under the Constitution to perform a speech. I have been saying that endlessly. Today I've been proven right. Hit subscribe to this channel, and now you get Democrats in full apoplectic meltdown mode.
We begin with Judge Jeanine Pirro, the 5 co-hosts. Judge, great to have you here. I've been watching you throughout the morning. First, I want to get your reaction as we do continue to hear from members of Congress, as obviously the political fallout of this we have yet to fully see. She plans to file articles of impeachment, Judge. Here's the tweet. Throw it up on the screen. The Supreme Court has become consumed by a corruption crisis beyond its.
So you look, ladies and gentlemen, and it's like this is hilarious. The Supreme Court is part of the judicial branch of our country. By the way, she didn't really know executive, legislative, judicial branches. It was like a funny, hilarious attempt at trying to explain our system of governance years back, and she kind of got mixed up, but they lost today because it was blatantly unconstitutional. Trump did not commit a crime. Instead of simply looking at the mirror, like when they cheated Bernie Sanders, okay, or when she was accused by Hans-A von Spakovsky, a former FEC chairman, of committing campaign finance issues and violations, possible campaign finance violations, because she had a super PAC and different super PAC with money going into a corporation or something like that. The Supreme Court has become consumed by a corruption crisis beyond its control. I'll explain. I'll interpret that for you. We lost yet again in the Supreme Court because Democrats routinely engage in unconstitutional conduct in an attempt to try to ruin Trump, only to have the Supreme Court rule yet again in favor of Trump. Today's ruling represents an assault on American democracy. Today's ruling upholds American democracy, which is, of course, the antithesis of what Democrats want. It's up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture. Nothing says that authoritarian capture like the Supreme Court ruling that Democrats yet again did something unconstitutional. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return. Yeah, go ahead. Please do that, and make sure also, while you're at it, to find out why they cheated Bernie Sanders, the person who you claim to care so much about, and why Bernie Sanders himself doesn't even care. But anyway, let's continue.
Its control, she writes. Today's ruling represents an assault on American democracy. Now it's up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture, she writes. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return. To you, Judge.
You know, Sandra, whenever anyone on the left talks about an assault against democracy, you know that it has little, if any, meaning. That's their go-to line when they don't have a substantive argument. Look, our government is set up in a way that there are 3 branches. The Supreme Court is a branch that has final decision on legal decisions in this country. They are not willing to accept it if it doesn't align with their political ideology. And this is part of the institutional breakdown of our government. We are now in a scenario where the left and the people who call themselves progressive are not willing to accept a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court. But make no mistake, there have been administrations, there have been politicians who have been in disagreement with decisions for the last 150 years. But now, all of a sudden, they think they should be able to impeach a Supreme Court justice. Look, a lawyer can be brought before the grievance committee for trashing a Supreme Court justice. And the sad part about all of this is there is a final ruling in this case. Their hatred for Donald Trump, their political ideology that causes them to support someone ideologically or cognitively declined is something that they consider paramount. And they're willing to do anything to destroy our system.
Well, Judge, the timing of this decision has really allowed.
Democrats lost a major Supreme Court decision yet again. They've gotten actually numerous Supreme Court decisions, one on the Second Amendment, one on a health issue that they obsess over. And it's like, what do they want? They've gotten recent decisions that benefited them. They've got decisions that didn't benefit them. They knew that when they cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016, and Bernie was basically a willing participant in the deception, they knew that they could lose. They knew that Clinton's servers with top secret intelligence on them would tank the campaign. I was telling them this. I was writing when I was on the left. They didn't care. They lost to Trump. I told the world that Trump would defeat Clinton, and they lost 3 Supreme Court justices. That's their fault entirely. They think that their corruption, their just unmitigated corruption, without any, they think they can do anything and have zero consequences. Like, no, when you continue to act, cheating Bernie Sanders in a failed, complete farce of a primary, the antithesis of democracy, and then servers with top secret intel on them that is highly illegal. It's impossible from a cybersecurity perspective to transfer classified data, top secret data onto servers. And then the Honorable James Comey says no reasonable prosecutor would indict. The American people aren't stupid. They know that Democrats are just getting away with things, whether it's Bernie Sanders or servers, they know. And so Democrats and media love to use the word reckoning. Well, there was a reckoning, a political reckoning. You lost in 2016 because of your treacherous, never-ending assault on, norms and traditions. Usually you have a primary that's based on meritocracy, at least in some way based on meritocracy. They threw that out the window. It was Clinton, Trump, and I think that Hillary Clinton will replace Biden again. They haven't really stopped in their mentality, their quest for political power, influence. Now they want to replace Biden, but he's the most popular candidate of all time, which, you know what, bolsters everything Trump was saying that day that they said he committed crimes. But again, Democrats and media love reckoning. Well, the Supreme Court gave them a reckoning today, and with the Colorado ban, yet they can't fathom that they were actually on the wrong side of history. It's like, it's not possible for them to even, accept or acknowledge that they're on the wrong side of history.
Allowed the Biden campaign to turn the page on the aftermath of the debate. And we just had a campaign call that we listened in on where former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, who's now part of the Biden campaign, spoke to this. Listen to what he said.
Okay.
My message today is simple. This is not a drill. Donald Trump is the single greatest threat to the United States of America in a generation. We can't let him anywhere near the open.
Except that he's up in every major poll, except that he was a very successful president. We had record low poverty, record highs in household median income. We had manufacturing jobs. He wanted to open up, and bureaucrats and Democrats shut down economic activity his last year in office, not his policies. And so we had first president to step foot in North Korea. We had the Abraham Accords that you see what's taking place. You have adversaries throughout the world trying to undo that peace deal. You had the Doha Agreement that got us out of America's longest-running counterinsurgency conflict, and Biden completely botched that. It was a May 1st, 2021 withdrawal. May 1st, not a haphazard withdrawal a couple months later in the summer. And so, again, they keep on making these leaps of logic And it's like most law enforcement love Trump. Most soldiers, most veterans love Trump. So, okay, Democrats, they're making leaps of logic here. But anyway.
Oval Office again. We can't count on the Supreme Court.
Is, if this guy was a member of law enforcement, I feel terrible for anyone that had contact with him. Number two, he's a former officer. Number three, explain why Donald Trump is ahead in so many states, especially those swing states that are so important. Look, these people have a big mouth. They speak about things that the American people are not aligned with. And when the United States Supreme Court makes a decision as important as this one, the Supreme Court speaking for the first time, because no other president has ever been criminally indicted for actions while in office. It's about time we listened.
I want to read just a little bit from the majority opinion written by Justice Roberts. The president is entitled at a minimum to a presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. Will Sharp, member of President Trump.
Presumptive immunity, meaning that even if he performs a speech Democrats don't like, too bad. You got to listen to him, and you can't try to pin the speech or link the speech to criminal behavior that has nothing to do with the speech, okay? Democrats are very good at waging legal battles. They're good at influencing bureaucracies. They're good at public relations through media. They have pretty much every journalist, every major publication as an extension of the Democratic Party. Not one Trump supporter at the Washington Post or New York Times. There's a reason for that. And it's like, yet half the country loves Trump, more than half. And so you have late night comedians. The Democrats are very good at public relations. The Supreme Court doesn't care. It's the only institution the Democrats can't influence with negative press and publicity. And so, yeah, you're going to have lower courts. You're going to have state courts, which, by the way, the state court can't convict Trump. It's unconstitutional, and I'll be 3 for 3 with that. You're going to have most of government siding with Democrats here and there. But the Supreme Court doesn't care. And that's really what's upholding democracy. And Democrats usually having their usual temper tantrum. As always, these are people who disown friends and family. You have to understand a lot of Democrats disown friends and family because they're so apoplectic when it comes to this. They're not used to taking the L. They don't know what a political loss means. They just are in constant offensive mode. And it's like, no, you actually engaged in unconstitutional behavior trying to indict Trump. You lost again. And by the way, imagine how they'll react on November 5th when he wins, but even before then, when his unconstitutional guilty verdict is overturned.
Trump's legal team joined me earlier on the Faulkner Focus with his response to all of it.
They've recognized a very broad doctrine of criminal immunity for former presidents. I think there are some choice paragraphs in there from Chief Justice Roberts criticizing the haste with which this prosecution has proceeded. The Biden campaign of lawfare against President Trump has just been dealt a decisive blow by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Really interesting part of that, Judge.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that the Supreme Court also attacked not just Jack Smith. I mean, this is a court that has ruled against him unanimously in the past. He is not considered an ethical prosecutor. He's the one who indicted the former governor of Virginia. That case was overturned. He has a political agenda. But what I think is so significant about the Supreme Court's decision is not the final recognition that when a president is engaging in official acts that involve core essential presidential duties, he has absolute immunity. immunity. And then, of course, it's remanded to the lower court to determine what are official versus unofficial acts. And for official acts, he has presumptive immunity. But they knocked down some of the indictment. They knocked down some of the arguments that the president isn't entitled to speak to his vice president or to the attorney general because the president has exclusive jurisdiction and authority over those particular issues as they relate to the Department of Justice and crimes that are being prosecuted.
Sorry, Democrats. Trump can speak to his attorney general, especially when discussing or addressing political topics that you don't like. So, again, this was a major victory for Trump and democracy and the rule of law. It's Democrats that have tried to, and we see this the second time in months, rewrite the Constitution to get Trump. He did nothing wrong. He did not commit a crime. And that's why they used a very vague, broad, ambiguous legal statute, the 18 U.S. Code 371 statute, saying that because he lied, he was no longer president and he couldn't perform a speech. How much of an imbecile do you have to be to make that argument? But yet again, Democrats tried to make that argument and again were struck down by the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court made it very clear that there are some parts of this that are protected by the core constitutional right of a president. And let me also say that a couple days ago, the Supreme Court rendered a decision kind of dumbing down some of the January 6 charges, saying that they were not supported. And now some of the lower courts have to look at not just the January 6 defendants, but Donald Trump as well in terms of how the Supreme Court attacked that January 6 obstruction charge.
Judge, I just want to sort of circle back to where we started, which was with AOC calling for articles of impeachment following this ruling. And you had heard ahead of this decision, top Democrats, Chuck Schumer among them, ask.
How stupid do you have to be to try to impeach Supreme Court justices because you can't accept that Democrats committed an unconstitutional act trying to imprison Trump? The indictment was an unconstitutional indictment struck down by the Supreme Court. This is the pillar of our democracy. This is the last place to decide what is law and what isn't law. Like this, the Supreme Court is the definition of the rule of law that Democrats claim to care about. And, they use that phrase all the time in the most disingenuous, dishonest manner. The Supreme Court is the rule of law. It's the epitome of the rule of law. And yet again, they ruled against Democrats. And yet again, Democrats are now trying to tear down one of the most important pillars of our democracy. Again, something they claim to care about, our republic, the Supreme Court.
Asking for Justices Alito and Thomas to recuse themselves from this case, making allegations about impartiality questions. What kind of an impact does it have when you have our elected leaders sort of questioning the credibility of the court?
Well, I think it has a huge impact. And I think that the Supreme Court has of late been subject to tremendous criticism. And I think that, there's a reason that our founding fathers wanted these justices to serve for life. I mean, they should not be affected by the mob or by the criticisms or the attempts to impeach. And I think that more than anything, they recognize how important their job is. In this case, Gorsuch said it himself. It's not just about the case before us. This is a case for the ages. And they knew that. And that's what the decision reflects.
Such a great point. All great points, Judge. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the 5 tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, be here tonight at around 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about now is the next obsession on this, channel, live streams. And I'm going to focus on the fact that his guilty verdict will be overturned by the Supreme Court. And it'll be just a never-ending stream of victories, major victories for Trump. And Democrats, of course, will try to impeach the Supreme Court and want to do away with it. And, a state cannot level. They're gonna try to jail Trump. Okay, this has been one of the worst political weeks in the history of the Democratic Party. Okay? They want to actually replace a sitting president. The same one who got, 81 million. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, great. Yeah, of course he did. Of course. That's why they want to replace him. But anyway, definitely fair and just. And Trump was wrong. Yeah, anyway, but he's still protected. But be here tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern. We will have a live stream tonight talking about the guilty verdict being overturned by the Supreme Court. And the reason is that a state cannot level an FEC charge at anyone without the Federal Election Commission involved. A state cannot level a federal crime without the federal government involved. Hit subscribe, people. Huge victory for this country. I've been totally, exonerated. I'm pretty much spot on everything I've been saying, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the kind words. They will try to jail him. Yes, they will try to imprison him. And they're going to give him jail time. July 11th is a countdown. The Supreme Court needs to see this and needs to overturn the absurd guilty verdict. That is even more of a constitutional issue than even the immunity issue. I'll be 3 for 3. Trump will be 3 for 3 on Supreme Court